Western countries have condemned what they call acts of genocide in Bucha in Ukraine. NATO held a meeting to look at this issue. Let's speak now to SABC News correspondent Rosie Birchard, who's live to us from Brussels. Rosie, good to have you with us on the program. What came out of the NATO meeting?
Well, I'm here at NATO HQ where those talks have wrapped up, and they came at a time which Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says is a critical moment in this conflict. He has been warning that the war in Ukraine might last for months and even years. That's why, he says, NATO allies are committing to continue sending weapons to Ukraine. And that was very much the demand or the request we heard from Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who joined the talks as a guest today. He said he had 3 items and 3 items only on his wish list: weapons, weapons and weapons. Now, we did hear from allies that they are committed to continue sending that military aid to Ukraine, but of course that's something that will not be welcome news to Russia, that has many times criticised NATO countries for sending those kind of weapons to Ukraine. And there is a sense here, or a fear among certain NATO allies, that sending certain types of weapons could be seen as escalatory. The Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has said he thinks that allies should be sharing both offensive and defensive weapons and not separating the two. He says any weapons are helping Ukraine defend itself as it's under attack from Russia. That was some of the key things happening today here in Brussels at these talks, which come really, as I said, at this crucial time, a crucial moment in this conflict, according to the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg.
Now, Rosie, one of the things, of course, that you mentioned is, the support around weapons. But we've seen, of course, Ukraine also calling for more support. Is NATO willing to extend itself here, and how far will it go?
Yes, well, NATO allies say they are willing to step up support and continue support, but Ukraine is also calling for help in another way. Not only support to Ukraine, but also measures against Russia. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba really gave Western powers a dressing down here today. He said that it shouldn't take atrocities like those reported in Bucha to prompt Western governments to come with tougher sanctions proposals. Now, EU governments are currently mulling fresh sanctions against Moscow in light of those recent events. They include a ban on the import of coal from Russia. However, they don't go as far as Ukraine would like. Ukraine is pushing for a full embargo on Russian energy imports to try and really cripple the Kremlin's ability to finance this war. That is seen as too risky by some EU member states who are reliant on Russia for their energy supplies. They say that could have devastating impacts on the economy and their energy security. So no agreement yet on exactly how to proceed with those sanctions among EU member states. And of course, Ukraine here today calling for much tougher sanctions still.
And while Ukraine calls for these tougher sanctions, of course, putting everybody in almost like a corner, as they say that they need to ramp up, as you say, how much of an impact have these sanctions have had, though, on Russia, and of course, in light of all those discussions that were also taking place?
Well, that's a great question, and it really is the fundamental question on leaders' lips. Do these sanctions work? We've heard from, for example, the Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki in the last few days criticising that method of sanctioning, saying that so far it has not yielded the results that they wanted, simply because the war is continuing. However, other EU leaders have pointed to that extreme kind of economic hardship in Russia, particularly Russian economy. But of course, overall, the goal here is really to reduce the Kremlin's ability to finance the war going forward. And EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell pointed out some pretty stark figures, noting that the comparison of what the financial aid that the EU has given to Ukraine is simply much less than the money that the EU has spent buying energy from Russia since this war began. So there are some really crucial questions there. also some EU lawmakers here in Brussels are raising questions about the fundamental idea of going forward with sanctions incrementally. So one stage, then tightening them further. Right now, EU leaders are looking at their 5th sanctions package. There has been criticism that incremental model simply doesn't work, and it should be rather one kind of big bang where all the sanctions are imposed at once. That seems to be a method that EU leaders are not interested in. For now, they are progressively tightening the screws on the Kremlin's power to finance the war. However, the war continues, and in fact, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has warned that this war could continue still for months or even years.
All right, Rosie, thank you so much for that update. Let's leave it there for now. That was SABC News correspondent Rosie Birchard coming to us live from Brussels.